I love Viscous. He is by far my favorite character in Valve's new MOBA shooter Deadlock, and I am 100% biased. Everything about him is so much fun, from his disruptive abilities that annoy the enemy team as well as do a crap ton of damage, to his character design and his voice that is straight up the turrets from Portal.
Put me down.
And overall just his fun gameplay. For those of you who are my age, you might get nostalgic flashbacks to playing De Blob on the Nintendo Wii back when you were a kid. Playing Viscous is just some of the most fun I've ever had in a multiplayer shooter before. So yeah, I'm going to be converting him into a D&D subclass for the new 2024 PHP. I bounced around the idea of what class I wanted to do, and it came down to a choice between Monk and Warlock. But as you probably know from the title and thumbnail, I've gone with Monk here. I just felt that it fit more because Viscous is a very sort of melee focused character, and there are lots of builds and ways to use Viscous that rely on doing melee and direct contact with the enemy in Deadlock. Something to note before I get into these subclass features is that I have converted them into spells as well for D&D, and that's partially one because I want them for my game, but two, not everyone plays Monk and not everybody wants homebrew subclasses in their game. So I figured why not convert them into spells as well since I've already done the work. That way you guys can use them in your game a lot more easily if you want to, and any class could use them, especially if you put these spells on like a magic item. So I will be tossing those spells up on the screen for you, as well as leaving links to those spells in the description, along with the Monk subclass. Alright, so let's dig into the subclass. Monks get a total of 4 subclass features. They get their first at 3rd level, then at 6th, 11th, and 17th levels. And that works out for us perfectly here because in Deadlock, characters also only get 4 abilities. So I've created the Monk subclass here, Warrior of Goo, and the first feature that you get at 3rd level as part of Warrior of Goo is Goo Ball. Now this is a conversion of Viscous's ultimate ability from Deadlock, his 4 ability. So that might seem a little strange to put his ultimate as the first thing you get, but typically the coolest or most important ability in subclasses are front-loaded, just as well as the most important class abilities are front-loaded. And I wanted you to get this early on because the Goo Ball is kind of quintessential to playing a Viscous. That's sort of the charm of it all. So you get the Goo Ball here, and you can use a focus point and a bonus action to turn yourself into this ball of goo. And you get a number of effects while you are this ball of goo. You're unarmored and do not benefit from any armor or non-magical worn protection. Your unarmored movement bonus is doubled, and the distance you can jump is doubled. You are resistant to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. On your turn, if you move 20 or more feet using your movement, your next unarmed strike is a stunning strike without expending a focus point. Stunning strikes made this way can be done more than once per turn, and anytime you expend focus points on a feature that deals damage, for example Flurry of Blows or redirecting an attack with deflect attacks, you may choose to double the amount of focus points expended to double the amount of damage dealt by the feature. And then to remain in this Goo Ball form, you must keep expending 1 focus point at the start of your turns. If you don't, then you exit the Goo Ball form at the start of your turn. So this ability is setting up for you to be able to turn into this Goo Ball basically in every encounter. With the new changes that the 2024 Player's Handbook made, the focus points, or what used to be key points, are something that you get back completely on a short rest. This means that most players will almost always have all of their focus points when going into a combat encounter. And this Goo Ball is going to be focus point hungry. You have to spend one just to get into it, and then when you're in it, you have to keep spending focus points to stay in it. Now there are a number of benefits, namely you get a lot of movement out of this, but also you get free stunning strikes basically. Now they changed the way stunning strike works, so you can't do more than 1 on a turn now, but these stunning strikes specifically you can. And this is obviously to try and emulate the ultimate in Deadlock. When you run into players, you stun them. Now stunning strike isn't a guaranteed stun. If they succeed on their saving throw now, they just get a bit of movement speed reduction and the next attack has advantage on them, which is still very good. But what's really great is you're getting these for free now, but you have to move 20 or more feet before you can get the free stunning strike, which is to really sort of play into the movement of the Goo Ball in Deadlock. And when you first get this ability at 3rd level, your movement speed will likely be 50 feet, because you'll probably have 30 feet by default, maybe you'll have more, I don't know, based on the race you pick, but you also get an extra 10 feet of movement if you're unarmored. And while you're in the Goo Ball, it specifically says you are unarmored. So you get that extra 10 feet, but then you also have your unarmored movement bonus doubled while you're in Goo Ball form, meaning that 10-foot bonus now becomes a 20-foot bonus. So you'll be sitting somewhere around 50 feet of movement. So you should be able to get at least 2 free stunning strikes on a turn if you have the movement and the unarmed strikes to make use of it. Now, the other thing that could make this Goo Ball form though a bit more focus point hungry is that other feature where you can expend double focus points to deal double damage with your focus point features. Now, obviously, as you go along in your monk career, you'll get more chances to make use of this with more abilities that do damage with focus points, especially the abilities you'll be getting as part of the rest of this subclass. But what this essentially does is make your Goo Ball form somewhat of like a burst damage form. You're expending a lot of focus points to basically do damage here and now rather than having sort of sustained damage over the course of a fight. So a pretty cool ability, and the high movement really pairs well with Monk, especially since you could use focus points for things like Step of the Wind to give yourself even more movement and more jump distance on top of the doubling of jump distance you get from the Goo Ball form. And then for the Goo Ball here, like all of the other abilities for this subclass, I'll throw up a spell conversion of this ability here on screen. Okay, so moving to the other 3 features you get here, I have done something a little unique with this subclass that the other subclasses don't do. For all the other monk subclasses, you just get your features at 6th, 11th, and 17th level after this. What I've done here is give you the same feature 3 times in a row called Viscous Art. This feature lets you pick one of 3 different features to gain at that level. And then at 11th level, you can pick from the 2 you didn't grab, and then at 17th level, you get the final one that you didn't pick yet. So what's essentially happening here is you get to pick what order you get the rest of your features in. Now, the rest of these features are the other 3 abilities converted from Deadlock. And one of the reasons I've done it this way is just because you do get to pick the order of these in Deadlock. The ultimate comes later usually, but the other 3, you just kind of get to pick which one you want to start the match with and then unlock the other ones as you go in your laning phase. So I've let you pick them here, but I've also done this because all 3 of these abilities, the way I've converted them, they scale really well. And I could see you wanting any one of these abilities early on. And since most games don't go very far up in the levels, I figured letting the player pick which one of these they want to get first, that way they can enjoy the one they like most earlier, is probably for the best. And honestly, I think more subclasses should do this. So I'm going to go over these 3 abilities in just any particular order because you could pick them in any particular order. So first up is Puddle Punch. So my conversion here of Puddle Punch lets you, when you make an unarmed strike, you can spend a focus point to convert it into a gooey fist that bursts from a surface of an object you can see within 30 feet. So you could have it come out from a wall or a box or something like that. The fist is a large object, and any creatures that are occupying the space that it emerges into takes damage from your unarmed strike if the attack roll would hit. So you still roll your attack roll with this converted unarmed strike, but any creatures that are in that space of that fist get hit by the fist if your attack would hit them. And then further from that, creatures that are damaged by it must succeed on a strength saving throw, or be shoved a number of feet away from the surface that the fist emerged from, equal to 5 times your proficiency bonus. So a pretty cool ability that again scales based on your unarmed strike damage, and is essentially a way to turn your unarmed strike into an AoE unarmed strike and hit multiple creatures, as well as the utility of being able to shove creatures pretty far depending on your level. And now I'll quickly throw the Puddle Punch spell conversion up on screen. The next feature I'm going to cover is Gelatinous Cube. This is a conversion of the Cube ability that Viscous has. So as a reaction, you can spend 2 focus points to encase yourself or an ally you can see within 60 feet into a gelatinous cube of goo. This cube is 1 size larger than the creature it's encasing, and because of that, it pushes any creatures that are within 5 feet to the nearest unoccupied space to make room for the cube. While you're in the cube, you can't be targeted by any attacks or spells, you're immune to all damage, you're incapacitated, and you heal for a number of rolls of the monk's martial arts die equal to the monk's proficiency bonus. The creature encased in the cube can choose to exit early, otherwise the cube just lasts until the start of the creature's next turn. So a reaction ability that allows you to protect yourself or an ally. And the scaling here is the healing. The healing scales, 1 with your martial arts die because your martial arts die goes up, but also your proficiency bonus. So if you took this cube for, let's say, your 6th level ability, at 6th level you would be getting 3d8 of healing when you cast this on somebody. Whereas if you took it for your 11th level ability, you would be getting 4d10 of healing. And here is the spell conversion for the Gelatinous Cube as well. And then the last feature we have here is Splatter. This is Viscous's sort of main burst damage ability that he has in Deadlock. And when you get Splatter fully upgraded in Deadlock, it allows it to start bouncing around multiple times and dealing more damage as it does so. So I've tried to represent that with this feature here as well. So you can expend 1 focus point as a magic action to launch a small ball of goo at an object not being worn or carried, or a creature you can see within 30 feet. If the target is an object, the ball of goo releases a burst of goo on impact, dealing damage equal to a roll of your martial arts die in a 5-foot radius around it. But if the target is a creature instead, you make a ranged attack using your unarmed strike, and on a hit, the ball of goo deals damage equal to 2 rolls of your martial arts die. So a little bit more damage if you target a creature directly rather than using it as an AoE. But regardless of whether you hit a creature or an object, if the ball of goo hits its target, you may spend an additional focus point to bounce the ball to a new target of your choice within 15 feet of the previous target. And you can keep doing this. You may bounce the ball a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, spending a focus point for each bounce. So I would say this Splatter ability is probably the most heavily scaling ability here. The amount of times you can bounce it scales off your proficiency bonus, the damage scales off your martial arts die, and the more focus points you have, the more you'll be able to bounce it. And so there is a bit of a trade-off with this ability, right? In order to keep bouncing it, it needs to hit its target. If you miss your target, then it won't be able to bounce. Now, sort of the thing to think about there is, if you're targeting an object, the ball of goo just hits the target and deals damage in a 5-foot radius around it, which is not a big radius, but it is enough to get multiple creatures within it. But if you target a creature, you have to make an attack roll, but if you hit, you get twice as much damage to that target directly. So there's a bit of a trade-off there of, if you go for the AoE version, you're guaranteed to be able to bounce it afterwards, but if you target a creature, you'll deal more damage to that creature directly, but there's a chance you miss, in which case you won't be able to bounce it. So a bit of a trade-off there, and perhaps something that you can think about with each bounce, right? Maybe you target a creature initially that has a low armor class, but nearby that creature is a target with a high armor class. So after you hit that creature, you bounce it to the ground near the other target because you know you won't be able to hit that one. But what I love about this is that as you get higher and higher level with Splatter and have a higher proficiency bonus and more focus points to use, you'll be able to bounce it a ton. At maximum, you'll be able to bounce it 6 times. So I just love it. And the fact that you can spend your focus points when you're in your Goo Ball form to make all of these things do more damage is even better. And of course, for the Splatter 2 here, I have a spell conversion that you can use instead of the subclass here. So there you have it. That was Viscous from Deadlock converted into a D&D monk subclass, Warrior of Goo. If you liked this video, let me know, because I'd be totally willing to convert other Deadlock characters into D&D subclasses, especially with the new 2024 Player's Handbook out. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.